Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smallenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Michelle Smallenberger, the CEO and a financial advisor here at Financial Design Studio. And today's episode is really going to make you think, to challenge your thinking. And this is on a topic that I think a lot of us think about, but it just seems too far off to really grasp, or maybe the way we're thinking about it is just too old. So that topic is retirement or work transitioning from your working years, whatever we're going to call that. But I know what you're thinking. Michelle's a financial advisor, and she's going to try and convince me why I need to work with Financial Design Studio. Wrong. Today, I really want to share a variety of scenarios I've seen as an advisor for families and individuals when they've considered the end of their working years and whatever that means for them, for you. Our job really as advisors is to get you to retirement and beyond, which kind of makes me think of the Pixar movie Toy Story, to infinity and beyond. Maybe that'll become like a new saying, to retirement and beyond. And even the word retirement, I think this is where even kind of talking about that, I think in today's working world, that really has a different meaning for every person, probably depending on your age. So I think this is really important to consider because everything we do as a financial advisor flows from this thought, this dream, these plans that you're wanting to achieve. And then it's our role to come alongside you and figure out how to make that happen. So to show you what it takes to get there, or show you the various options you have to make a change. If you're not going to quite get there, then here we could do this, and it'll be some variation of that. And how can we tell you if you'll have enough if we don't know what you're trying to do? And it's possible that this thinking starts right there with the concept of enough. So if you want to know what's possible, then you'll want to keep listening. And I would say that this episode is for everyone who is still working or still has a job, because what we're going to be talking about is that thinking of what do I do after, or what is the process of retirement, the before years, nearing retirement, into what that actually looks like. So our traditional concept of working hard when we are young and retiring when we're in our mid-60s or early 70s it's seen some fluctuation over the last several years. So people are starting to question whether that's really what they desire to do. And they're also starting to wonder if it's necessary or even desirable. You'll even hear some experts say that the word retirement should be thrown out altogether. Now, in today's economy, we don't only have jobs like physical labor or manual tasks that came about during and since the Industrial Revolution. So if you think back to what work looked like back then, there was a lot of, kind of assembly lines or production jobs. So you'll find many more jobs today that require intellectual rigor or using your mind rather than physical or manual labor. There's many people trying to invest or create new types of solutions or services that they think the world needs, and that doesn't necessarily involve producing a product that people buy. So as you near the transition from your full working years, and I'll just put that in air quotes, your full-time working years, whatever that looks like for you, have you found yourself questioning what it even looks like? Have you found it difficult to even consider not working anymore? I think that can be challenging for a lot of people. What am I going to do? When you don't go to work every day, we're in this habit of I get up in the morning, I go to work, and when I'm done, I come home. And that's a really big habit for years of our life. So for many reasons, I think this brings a lot of fear and anxiety. There is a famous author, Mitch Anthony, and he has a book, Retire Mentality, and it's really helping people to actually think through what you're going to do on day one of retirement. And a lot of people, let's say that, you enjoy golfing or doing something outside, and you say, day one, well, I'm going to golf in retirement. Okay, so he actually walks through and has an example. Okay, day one, you get up, you go to the golf course, you go home. Well, that was fun. Day 2, you do the same thing. Day 3, 4. But by day 10, Is that really as enjoyable as it was? And so this is where we really start to think through, what does that actually look like? It's been interesting, even in my experience, seeing individuals that don't have hobbies. So even while you're working, are there things you enjoy doing outside of work? And that could be with your kids. It could be with friends. It could be something by yourself too. Whether that's a hobby like woodworking or art or crafts or fishing or hunting, or there's so many sports, there's so many different ones, golf, swimming. I can just think of anything that people enjoy doing. But I think this really makes a big difference as you start to think about what those years will look like and what you want to do. So in today's episode, I want to give you an inside look into a variety of ways that I've seen people retire or semi-retire, maybe take a couple years off or work from a totally different location for a season, parents who stayed home with their kids instead of working, or even just switch the type of job they're doing in the same industry so that it's less stressful or for some other reason. And we're going to talk about these more in depth. What's fun about my job is that I get to hear people dream. So when I'm talking about all these different ways that you can transition out of your working years, this is fun for me on the other side of the table or the other side of the screen because I get to hear you dream. I get to hear people talk about their hopes and plans for the remaining days that they're alive. It can sometimes feel a bit like an episode of Shark Tank where you hear the ideas people have and then you've got to see if it's possible. Everyone's listing, these are all the things I want to do. And that is a great place to start. So tell me you've never sat staring at the TV deciding whether a person's entrepreneurial idea on Shark Tank is good or not. I know I have, and sat there with Steve and Emma, our family, and we've sat there saying, no, that is not something that we would buy. Where did they come up with that idea? But then others where we're like, can we order that now? I love this idea that everyone's dream, everyone's future looks different because it should. Everybody's different. And I think sometimes this is how people view the future and retirement. It's like a dream that they really aren't sure will come true. And so this is where it's just kind of far out. They can't grasp it. So that's what I really want to dig in today, is to kind of share some of this, what I've seen in working with clients, to kind of give you a picture of what it can look like and maybe some of the things to think about if some of these situations sound, enjoyable or ideal to you, and you think that that might be the way that you want to transition out of your working years. And we talk a lot about transitioning out of your working years, but this is something else that Mitch Anthony talks about, is retiring to something. So when we talk about hobbies, when we talk about maybe volunteering, all of these things that you possibly can't do while you're working because you're working, a full day job, these are the things that sometimes I think people dream about. When I retire, I'm going to be able to do all of these things. Or you'll have grandkids, or spend time with friends, or travel. So these are the types of things that when we talk about retiring from your working years, it's this type of thinking. What are you retiring to? So let's dig in to kind of spur on this thinking. And really that's this episode, is to get you, your mind kind of swirling and thinking. And hopefully it'll bring up some good conversations too with your family or with friends to even further that. The first one is really kind of, I think, our traditional thought of retirement. So retiring early to never work again. So this is one variation of that. If you're not just going to stop working at the normal age of, your 60s and 70s, the first variation that I see is people retiring early to never go back again. And I think when you hear some of these, this really challenges kind of our traditional thinking of retirement, because when I say some of these things, maybe depending on even if you're retired, these might sound like kind of casual, almost kind of like, I don't know, almost like, okay, yeah, sure, that sounds great. But in reality, you've got to work all of those years to actually be able to retire. But I think with what we're seeing in our economy today and what I've already described with the different types of labor that we have available, I think this is where it's really leading to these different options that you have as you think about retiring. So just understand that when we talk with clients, a lot of times we're telling them, we've retired 100 times or hundreds of times so that you can retire once. And we also remind people that when you retire, we understand that you're not planning to go back to work because your financial plan didn't work out. So that's the goal of all of the planning that then comes behind this. And so so these are not, while these options may be options, just that, and you may like the traditional sense of working until a certain age and then being completely done. That is perfectly fine. So this is really just to kind of spur on your thinking and let you know that we've actually seen a lot of different ways that people are doing this. So let's dig in. This retiring early to never return to work. These are individuals that kind of like the idea of working until sometime, it may be in your 50s or early 60s, and you don't want to go back to work. So it's really just an earlier version of your traditional retirement, kind of at Medicare age of 65 or Social Security age of, 67 up to age 70. And so this is just someone who says, you know what, I've worked really hard and I want to be able to be done before then. And they want to make sure that they have enough saved so they'll be able to afford those retiree years, kind of those earlier extra years where they might be doing more. Now, don't get me wrong, with this option, you don't have to have millions more saved to be able to retire earlier. Now, you might, but you don't necessarily need to either. You need to have what you need for the life you're hoping to live, and that's different for everybody. So I'm really serious when I say that. You would be amazed at how many people survive on their Social Security and other small income or a small withdrawal from their retirement account each year. So this is where we always encourage people to live your life, not someone else's. What you need and how much you need to be saving is really dependent on what it is that you're wanting to do and all of those things that you want to accomplish or do, whether that's travel or, spend money on grandkids or, your hobbies, those will all kind of dictate how much you need to save or the extent that you're going to be able to do those things. So that's why we say it's okay to dream, and then we'll come up with those answers and the what's needed to make this happen on the other side. So while we're talking about living your own life, I'd like to also just suggest that you also get advice for your own situation and be very careful about taking advice geared towards someone else's plan. We're seeing an increasing number of people who they're trying to do their own financial planning, which is just resulting in a lot of tax filing corrections because they don't fully know what they're doing. So that's just kind of one caution that we're really seeing more. So when we share strategies we use with clients, like many of the videos on our YouTube channel, we're sharing what people like you may be able to use, but it's got to be done right. So there's a lot of things in the IRS code that, a video or a really long blog post just might not be able to capture. And so everybody's situation is unique. So that's all I'm going to say about that. It's your future. So let's plan for what you want, not basing our planning on what someone else is doing. All right, so the second option is really semi-retirement and phasing out of work into full retirement. So this is, not necessarily that I'm going to retire early, but I'm actually going to kind of phase into retirement, phase out of work, instead of kind of a hard stop. Now, these are people that they're just not ready to start or ready to stop working all at once, but instead they want to phase out gradually. That's kind of what that process looks like. Maybe it is that they're hoping to mentor others who will come up behind them to take over. So think, for example, if you're a corporate executive and you have a lot of experience and knowledge, and you actually want to mentor and train the people coming up. You want to spend some time doing that. Maybe this kind of gradual moving on until those people are ready. So it could be like maybe a smaller size company, just kind of thinking of some of these places where that could happen. Or maybe they're hoping to kind of phase out so they can find and look for the next thing that they're curious about or the next opportunity that they can pour into others or give of themselves to make a difference. So I think of, people like this where they're kind of transitioning out. It's really, they're probably in a role where they do teach, they do mentor a lot of people. And so that experience and knowledge that you have, because if you think about this, at the end of our working careers, we have all of this knowledge and experience. And I think this is sometimes why it can be hard to shift into, okay, so tomorrow I'm just going to wake up and not use any of that. And so kind of phasing out and semi-retiring or semi-moving into those years where we're not doing that as much or every day can really be a helpful way to share and pass on some of that knowledge and experience that we've gained. Now, one of the most valuable things you have as someone who's worked for years in your career is that experience and knowledge to see things that a new graduate or a new hire hasn't. So we've all heard expressions that tell us how valuable experience over knowledge can be. It doesn't mean it always is, but there's a lot of truth to that. So, think of just the people who maybe you're hiring. Maybe you're a person who kind of sees the new hires come in right after graduation or just starting their careers. There's a lot of things that you can pick up in the first year or two from them working with you. They're going to be able to see a lot that you're doing, and that's going to help them. That's just going to help them further their career. So sometimes we need to add that experience to the knowledge. So think about that as that's something really valuable that you have that they need. And so if you're a person that really values that and says, I want to be able to share this, I want to be able to continue this, maybe, in a different way, there are options for that. Now, if this is a reason you're finding it hard to leave your career, you could consider ways to continue mentoring and teaching locally or within your industry. So it could be that you actually move into a role of being a teacher or a mentor. There are so many business groups, professional groups, or teaching. Maybe it's at a local university or classes where you want to share something. There's so many places that you can actually share all of that if that's what you have a passion for. So I just want to encourage you that if those are things that actually sound interesting, that may be something that you're kind of retiring to for a period of time. And again, it might be that if you're someone who's retiring early and you're kind of phasing out of that this is something that you do for maybe 3 to 5 years until you finally want to be done. There's so many different variations of what that can look like. You can come alongside people who are actually doing this, full time to where you're just coming in maybe once or twice a week to meet with people, or maybe it's on an as needed basis. If someone says, hey, can we just, meet for lunch? I'd really like to get your insight into this. I just know after the number of years that I've been working, I just know that 15 to 20 years of experience really adds up for people who are just coming out of college or high school and they're looking ahead to what is it I even want to do. So just don't, devalue what it is that you do have and the things that you do enjoy and all of that experience and knowledge you've gained along the way. The third option I can think through is really someone who says, I just want to take a couple of years off work in the middle of my career. And I think this is where, we've seen some of this just kind of in the last few years. This may sound really foreign, but if you're a high income earner who's on a solid career path that you see heading where you want it to go, you may be thinking, well, wait, why would I want to take a couple of years off? So typically when I've seen clients who have been in this position where they want to take a couple of years off work, it could be for a couple of different reasons. It could be because they're in a really stressful situation, and honestly, it's affecting their physical, their mental, and spiritual health so much that they need to stop and take a break and then just find a fresh start in a less stressful environment. So for these, it can be health related. It can be, just resetting priorities. And it also can be to where it isn't your health, but it could be someone in your family that you just need to stop working so you can take care of them because you're in a place where you can. And maybe you're in a career or an industry that actually allows for, or, makes it easy for someone like you to be able to step out for a year or two and be able to step back into a similar role and just continue on. So it's not going to affect your career that much. These are actually out there, these positions, these types of jobs. There are some things you want to consider if some of these non-traditional work-life balance ideas are what you're hoping for. So with this one, especially where you're going to take a couple of years off work, because we just talked about how experience and knowledge are so important. Does your industry support this type of work environment? For example, it may not be your current job that you're going to go back to, but a role in your field that actually needs your experience and knowledge. So it could be that you're going to transition to something else. So I guess if this is you and you're thinking, I'm going to take a couple of years off work, what I think is important is not necessarily having this mentality that I'm going to stop working for a couple years from what I'm doing today. And in a couple years or whatever that time is, I'm going to go back to the exact thing I'm doing. Now, it is very possible that that is what it could look like. However, maybe have a mindset of I'm going to get back into something similar, or, it could even be a different company, but it also could be with the same company. I've seen all of those happen for people too. So I think what's important with this piece here is really remembering the reason why you're taking the time off. And, if you're taking a couple of years off, there's something kind of initiating that thought. And so whatever that is, I think that's what's really important to keep in mind of the reason you're doing it. And that when you go back to work, whenever that is, or whatever that looks like, it might be a little different. I want to give you an example of what this kind of looks like. I knew a doctor who once retired, was performing surgeries, and instead of doing that, it was really kind of just one day. It was probably over a course of time. It really just got tired of doing the same thing and having to be up early and having to be there for surgeries and kind of this higher stress job. And instead of performing surgeries, switched to working for an insurance company. And if you think about this, insurance companies, or if you aren't aware of this, insurance companies, they need doctors in their type of medical practice. So if you have a specific medical practice, they actually need doctors on the insurance side to confirm that the procedures that patients are having, so these claims that are being filed for these health services, they actually need doctors or medical professionals to confirm that the procedures being prescribed are actually, in fact, what are needed. Just throwing out some ideas, maybe there's physical therapy or things like that on the, before surgery or after, or whatever the process is that, they follow. It may just be things that, again, back to that experience and knowledge this person had. And so they instead worked for the insurance company. Now, because this doctor had done it for years, they had that knowledge necessary to know when something unnecessary was being prescribed or suggested. So, that's a pretty big shift if you're moving from performing the surgery to now, really just kind of reading medical notes and actually making sure that what's being done is right, or, kind of raising the red flag if you see something that just doesn't make sense with the facts that are being presented for a specific health situation. So I just point that out because that was a pretty stark difference from, going into the doctor's office every day to maybe even working from home, reviewing claims online at home, or going to the insurance company. So, and in this specific case, it wasn't a really huge difference of what the doctor was going to be receiving compensation-wise. So salary, when we talk about salary, now benefits was a little bit different. So, but salary-wise, it was still a few $100,000 for a doctor of that caliber that they were going to be making. So what I'm trying to express in this example is that there are jobs that you can do, and you don't have to sacrifice. I think a lot of people think they have to sacrifice something in a big way, like salary or benefits or something. So what I'm trying to share with you is that it may not necessarily be the case. So until you actually start thinking about this, which again is the purpose of today, is to think about this and to start talking with people and colleagues and seeing what is actually possible. All right, so the fourth one is just working from a totally different location for a season of the year, whether this is abroad or here in the U.S. Now, I think this one really is specifically a result of the past few years and how some businesses don't need to have employees at a desk in one location to do their job. Over the past few years, think about how many people moved to a different state. You probably know people, or even moved homes just down the street because they needed room to have a work or an office kind of work from home situation. So this one I think is really more specific to kind of our current environment. Do you have skills, experience, or knowledge that would be desirable for a wide variety of professions if necessary? So this is one where if you're wanting to work somewhere else, as employers, there are times where they might need you to be in person. And so if you're somewhere else for a season, whether that's abroad or here in the U.S., again, just think, how are you going to get back? Are you going to be available if this is something? But again, in this situation, this is something that you're planning for, or you're saying, this is a priority to me. I want to be able to do this. I want to see some other place or work from somewhere else. Now, when we're planning for and considering these situations, you've got to have some knowledge about how marketable your skills are. I say this, would you be okay if you start with a position that you don't ideally want to eventually land where you do want? So let's say you move to a different area and for whatever reason, your job that you're doing ends because you did need to be more in person. Are you flexible to actually switch to a different industry or job type? And this maybe you're in sales and you're in sales now in a different industry instead of what you were in. So I think with some of these, there can be a learning curve that you might have to pick up on, but the skills that you've gained could still be applicable. So this is something I think with this situation that you really want to be thoughtful of. Also could be, how long might it be before I find a job? If I move and this season of the year I'm living somewhere else and I lose my job, how long could I be without a job? And again, this goes back to, do you have that emergency fund in place? Do you have, are your savings on track? So the rest of your goals or your plan is actually building all of this in, or the potential, risks that can be seen. So, I've seen clients that they leave an employer even only to get rehired shortly after by that same employer. And they're actually earning more in the new role at that same employer than they were when they left initially. So, sometimes it can be that you actually need to leave a job to be able to come back to a job that's paying higher. Again, this can be really specific to your industry, but if you are not a person that, spends time with colleagues or, other people in your industry, it can be that maybe these are just things that you're not aware of. And so this is kind of why, sometimes you'll have, times after work, or there will be events with other professionals that, companies host because they want you to kind of be talking and sharing experiences so that, if you're someone who's maybe lower in a company or earlier in your career, you're starting to learn from the people that are higher up in your career and you're seeing the potential of where you can go. Well, likewise, if you're outside of now your work environment, let's say you're just in a group professional setting where people are coming from all different employers, the benefit to you is that now you're talking and working with and mingling with other professionals who are sharing what's possible with you outside of your industry. So this is where, if you're starting to kind of think of a lot of this flexibility, I think this is where a lot of these groups for professionals or just kind of these after hours that, you might see around can be really valuable because there's a lot of insight that you can gain that maybe you don't have. All right, so the last one we're going to touch on for today is just taking some time off work while your kids are young to stay home with them. And I think, this is another one that could be common. A lot of people might do this. But I've actually seen both moms or dads stay home while their kids are young. So again, it's just kind of bucking this normal trend of mom stays home, and her career is kind of put on hold, or she stays home and doesn't go back to work, but I have seen dads do this too. Now, something to consider here is whether you hope to go back to work or you're going to start a new opportunity. So this is exactly what you want to be thinking through. If you hope to go back to work, then just what I was talking about with staying in touch with colleagues from your industry or past jobs may be really valuable. So kind of getting out, maybe on a quarterly basis or monthly, where you're actually spending time with other professionals so that you're kind of staying up on the trends in your industry. Again, you might want to keep up with continuing education that will keep you active with new trends or laws or advances. I know just with financial planning and tax and investing, so much changes with different laws or packages of legislation that are passed. And so this is, if you're thinking that you want to go back to work and this is only for a short time, these things could be really valuable to you to just keep up with. Now, in these situations, it might be really helpful to set a plan for the desired length you'll stay home or the points when you're going to reevaluate your decision. So let's think about mom and dad who are considering this change. They have a couple young kids and they've just decided, working, having both of us work, and now kids at these points in life. So it can be like, I'm thinking toddler ages, it could be baby, any of these stages before kids go to school, maybe full time. These are some of the common ages, but thinking about mom and dad's, having this conversation. So this is what I'm saying is you're kind of talking through, okay, how long, do we think you want to stay home? How long do you think you will stay home? And then maybe let's say that that's the next 3 years or 5 years. Okay, well, maybe it's setting, on the calendar. It's actually setting every year. Let's talk about this. Just kind of reevaluate, or every 6 months. Let's reevaluate to talk about, is this working? Are you enjoying it? Are you glad? Are the kids, better off for it? Are you, or are you starting to think, I kind of miss working? I think just kind of building in some of those times where you're actually reevaluating it and having those discussions is really helpful, because it's not a set it and forget it. We said we were going to do this and it's going to last this long, and so it has to. Again, really what we're talking about today is this flexibility, this dreaming of where it is that we want to be. What is it that we need for our life right now, for your life? And you're living your life. So these are the things that I think are just helpful to kind of have that plan, this discussion plan in place, so that you know when you're going to talk about it. Because I know some parents who have actually said, I'm going to stay home, and then shortly after they realize that is not for them. And so, quickly after they're back at work. Or parents that do stay home and they decide, I love this and I never want to go back to work. Whatever it is that you decide is totally okay. That is what you're deciding. That's what's so great about this, is that you get to dream and think about what it is that's important for your family. What's a priority? So I hope I've inspired some thinking about what the future may hold for you and your financial plan. And I said in the beginning, many people think dreaming about the future is just that. It's a dream. No one knows what tomorrow brings. So I don't want us to think, hey, we're dreaming and we're building this plan that it's totally going to happen. It might. No one knows what tomorrow is going to bring, and that is for sure. Many people think they won't live long enough to fully experience their plan. So this is where, sometimes people will think, my family history shows that I only have like a few years after I work before maybe it's Alzheimer's or some other health matter that is consistent with their family. So this is something that I hear frequently, and it is actually really important that you do know your family history. So medically, there can be some things that, like clients like this, that will say, I have a mom, I had a dad, this is what happened to both of them. And so I'm expecting that the first 5 years of my retirement, I really want to enjoy it because I think this is what's going to happen to me too. I think it's really valuable to have that knowledge. Many people think they won't live long. So just like this example, this is what we're trying to build for. But what I want to also say is, what if you did? What if you do live longer than you're thinking, or you have better health than what your family, history shows? Would you rather plan and prepare for what you hope the future will bring, or think it won't happen and be left doing what you didn't want? You didn't want to because you never dreamed it was possible. This is what the purpose of this episode is to actually think and dream and get all of these thoughts out there. And then we see what's possible. And so as life goes, we talk about financial plans, but it's actually financial planning. And we'll say this a lot, is that it's planning because it's always happening. Life changes, work changes. And even while we may say, this is what I want to happen, something is going to happen to where that's going to change even a little bit. It happens for everybody. Something goes better or something doesn't go as well as we hope. And so this is why it's always happening. It's planning. So it's not our job as your advisor to judge whether your dream is far out, but it is our role to tell you if you want to accomplish something, what other things may need to happen, or financial sacrifices that you'll need to make if the goal is that important. So if these are your goals, then it's our job to say, then this is what needs to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then we're probably going to need to change this, here or here a little bit. And so there's kind of, some levers that you can pull. But at least going into the future with these dreams or these hopes, these are the things that you already have in the back of your mind, knowing, okay, well, if we don't quite save this much, if we don't quite do this thing, then I have some options. So that's what we're trying to help you think of. So in order for you to live out the financial plan, this financial plan that we're setting, you'll need clarity, which is gained when we put numbers to the dreams you have. So when we're building plans, that's where the clarity comes. We put the numbers to these dreams, and then confidence, which is what you gain with that clarity, so that you can actually live out the plans you've hoped would happen. This is the process of dreaming, then we gain clarity of what's actually possible, and now we have the confidence where we can actually live out these dreams and make changes along the way if we need to. But I hope this has inspired just some of this thinking. So thank you for listening to this episode. Thanks for kind of sharing in this dreaming, or maybe it's even challenging. I think some people, like I mentioned, don't have hobbies or don't have things that they're looking forward to. And so maybe this has just kind of even been a challenge for you to start thinking of what it is that you might want to do, or even just start having that discussion. I think sometimes it can even be scary to have the discussion or to share and kind of be open and honest about, this is what I really hoped would happen. And so I hope that this has really spurred on a lot of that thinking. If you have questions or if you want to share anything with us, you can always email us at podcast@financialdesignstudio.com. And like I've mentioned, you can go to our YouTube channel to grab more videos, but we'll see you on the next podcast episode in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced, fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.